Let's do some math. Solving by factoring. Main concepts. First of all, I would just say pause, write this down, and I'm going to highlight a few important things. So, main idea when you're solving a quadratic equation is that you're setting it equal to 0 and solving. Now, the 0 part, it has to equal 0. That's one part of it. But then the way that we're going to solve it, at least for right now, is by factoring. So one of the easiest ways is the factoring technique, if it's an available option. So you factor the quadratic equation, which is something we've already covered how to do. Then you set each factor equal to 0, and you solve each factor individually, which we'll practice that here in a moment to see what that really looks like. Oops. So first example, let's factor this, and then we'll set it equal to 0 and solve it. So I've got x squared minus x minus 6. The multiply number is -6, and the add number is -1. Well, that's actually a fairly simple one. That would be x minus 3 and x plus 2, because -3 times 2 is -6. -3 plus 2 is -1. Now we factored it, that's the important first step, but we need to set it equal to 0. Alright? So I've done what the main idea was, the main concept, but I need to take each factor now and split it apart, and this factor equals 0 and this factor equals 0. So I take x minus 3 and I set that equal to 0. I take x plus 2 and I set that equal to 0, and I solve each of these individually. Well, okay, add the 3. 0 plus 3 is 3. So x equals 3 is a solution. Over here, subtract the 2. 0 minus 2 is -2, so x equals -2 is a solution. Those are the answers right there. But here's a thought for you. How are the solutions here related to the factored form here? Well, what I'm talking about specifically is here. This factor form is x minus 3, but the solution is positive 3. Or this was x plus 2, and the solution was -2. So as you might be drawing the conclusion, the relationship is the solution is just the opposite sign of the factored form. Solution is the opposite sign of factored form. Okay. Another example, we got to factor it first. So this time the multiply number is 4 times -6. The multiply number is -24. The add number is 5. So what multiplies to 24? -24? That would be so that would be -8 and +3, or +8 and -3. And based on the fact that our add number is +5, I want the 8 to be positive and the 3 to be negative. So again, these numbers multiply and add correctly. So I'll write them in factored form: x plus 8, x minus 3. Bottoms up, I need to divide by that 4. So divide by 4, divide by 4. 8 divides perfectly by 4, and that is 2. 3 does not divide perfectly by 4. It doesn't simplify either, so the 4 bottoms up in front of the x. 4x minus 3. So once again, I need to solve these. So I'm going to take, I set it equal to 0, set both of them equal to 0. The reason for that, by the way, why we're allowed to split this apart and set both of them equal to 0, is because if I have either one of these factors equal to 0, so this equals 0 or this equals 0, then 0 times anything else is equal to 0. So the powerful part of the solution is that one of these, either of these factors is 0, then it doesn't matter what the other factor is, because 0 times anything is 0. So that's what this principle is based on. So I just need to find, how do I make each factor equal to 0? So x plus 2 equals 0. Like we talked about in the last slide, it's just going to be the opposite sign. X equals -2 here. But this other one is this other one's a little bit different. So let's go ahead and work this one out. 4x minus 3 equals 0. Let's add the 3 to the other side. Okay. So now I've got 4x equals positive 3. So to get what x is, I'm going to have to divide by 4, and that's my solution right there. So both of my solutions then are x equals negative 2, the one I got originally, and x equals positive 3/4. So that's my answer. Now, one of the solutions is a fraction. That would be this x equals 3/4. How can we relate that back to the factored form? So how do I look at this and connect that back to the factored form again? Because again, I want to look for the shortcut of how to tell what this answer is just by looking at factored form. Well, once again, I can see that my answer here is positive, but in the factored form it was a minus. So again, it's the opposite sign. But then, as far as the fraction part of it goes, the 3 here was the numerator, and the 4 was the denominator. Which actually, going back even a step further, that's this right here. Okay, so I just really needed the opposite sign of this as the solution. Now I still had to do bottoms up to write it in factored form, but really this right here is the solution, or the opposite sign of that is the solution. So the couple of notes there is it's still the opposite sign, but the denominator was the number with the x, and the numerator is this other number here, the plus or minus number over here. Okay, one more example. Once again, we need to factor this. This, as we talked about in class before the break, this is a difference of squares. We should be able to very quickly tell what this factors into by square rooting each of these numbers. Square root of 9x squared is 3x. The square root of 25 is 5. So then the answer, the factored form answer, would be 3x plus 5 and 3x minus 5. We set this equal to 0. And based on what we saw with the last slide, then I should be able to tell what the answer is without directly writing it back out again. I know it's always the opposite sign, so it's going to be not positive, but negative 5. And this number here in front of the x is always the denominator. Okay? And then I look over here at the second one, it would be positive 5, and over the 3 is the denominator. Well, here's something more unique to this type of answer. I've got the exact same fraction, one of them is positive and one of them is negative. There's actually a quicker way to write that. You just use what's called the plus or minus sign. And what that is it's very literally a plus sign on top of a minus sign, or negative sign. And so what this means, this is my answer here, when you see this plus or minus sign, that means both things. It means both the positive 5 over 3 is an answer, and the negative 5 over 3 is an answer. Now, if you write both fractions out for me, like negative 5 over 3 and regular 5 over 3, that's right. It's not incorrect. It's just I'm showing you how you can write your answer a little bit quicker here. Okay, big things to pay attention to were how to take from factored form what the solutions are. So make sure if you didn't understand that, you go back and check that out. But that's the main concept. Make sure you took good notes and fill in your summary for your WSQ.